What is up, you awesome kisters? It is CistReactZ. Before this video starts off, guys, gotta let you guys know that there is a new CistReactZ shirt that is on Teespring right now. Make sure you guys go check it out. Click the link in the description to get 40% off on your purchase. So yeah, and it is made by Carson V from Twitter, so make sure you guys follow him if you had one. Peace out.
Keep it on the level. Keep it on the level. I'm climbing up the. Keep it on the level. Keep it on the level.
Alright, what is up, you awesome kisters? It is CistReactZ, guys, and welcome back to yet another chapter of Le Twisted One. So yeah, guys, let's get right back into this. So yeah, we are learning all the time. Hopefully, at least some of you are learning right here in this class. Dr. Treadwell's students laughed nervously, but she continued over them. It had apparently not been a joke. When we learn, our minds must decide where we will store that information. Unconsciously, we determine what group of things it is most relevant to, and connect it to that group. This is, of course, only the most rudimentary explanation. When computers do this, we call it an information tree. Charlie was only half listening. She knew this already and was taking her notes on the autopilot. Dang. That's crazy. Since their expedition to Freddy's the day before, she hadn't been able to get this image of Dave's body out of her head. His torso and gruesome lace of scars that have covered it. And when he was alive, he'd shown them to her. She'd shown them off to her, boasting of his survival. While he never do that. I'm sorry. While he never told her that what the heck? While he never told her what had happened, it must have been an accident. He used to wear those suits all the time. She could see him now, before all the murders, dressed as a yellow bunny dancing merrily with a yellow bear. She shook her head suddenly. She shook her head suddenly, trying to get rid of the image. Are you okay? Artie whispered. She nodded, waving him off. But the dead man in the field, that wasn't any accident. Someone forced him inside, but why? Charlie restlessly tapped her fingers on her desk. That will be all for today, Dr. Treadwell said, her chalk and stalked off to the auditorium stage with a purposeful step. Her teaching assistant, a flustered graduate student, scurried forward to collect homework. Hey, do you have any time to go over some of this? Artie asked Charlie as they gathered up their things. I'm in a little bit over my head in this class. Charlie paused. She promised to make up her first date with John, but she wasn't meeting him for over an hour now that she'd been to Freddy's. Charlie almost felt like she was on familiar ground, even if it was soaked in blood. I have some time now, she told Artie, who lit up. Great, thanks so much. We can go work over at the library. Charlie nodded. Sure. She followed him across the campus, only half engaged as she explained his difficulties with the material. They found a table. Charlie opened her notebook to the pages she'd taken down today, pushing them across so Artie could see them. Actually, do you mind if I sit next to you? Oh my god. It's easier if we're both looking at the same thing, right? Oh yeah. Charlie pushed her notes back over as he came around and sat next to her, scooting his metal folding chair over to hers, just a few inches closer than she would have had preferred. So, where'd you get lost? She asked him. I was telling you the way over, he said with a hint of reproach in his voice, then cleared his throat. I guess I understand the beginning of the lecture where she was reviewing last week's material. Charlie laughed. So basically you want to review everything new from the day. Artie nodded sheepishly. Charlie started from the beginning, pointed at her notes as she went. As she flipped through the pages, she noticed her own scribbles in the margins. Charlie leaned closer where harsh outlines and rectangles were made at the bottom of the page. They were all colored in like slabs of granite. She stared at them with sensation of deja vu. They were important. I don't remember drawing that, she thought uneasily. Then it's just doodles. Everyone doodles. She turned to the page to the next segment of the lecture, and a strange alertness rose at the bottom of her neck, as if someone might be watching her. There were more doodles in the margins of this page, too, and the next one. All of them were rectangles. Some were large and some were small. Some scribbles, some outlined and some solidly that her pen had when the paper through and torn it. All of them were vertical, taller than they were wide. Charlie started tilting her head to see from the different angles until something pinged inside of her. Sammy, is this you? Does this mean something I don't understand? Oh, snap. Yeah, they're still alive. That's probably what they're trying to tell you. Charlie glanced at Artie. He was staring at the paper too. As she watched, he turned the page again. The next pages were the same. They were filled with neat, clear notes, but little rectangles were squashed into every available spot on the page, stuffed into the space between the bullet points, crammed into the margins and tucked away where little lines came out short. Quickly, Artie flipped the page back. He looked up at her and smiled, but his eyes were wary. He thinks she's crazy. Why don't you try the first problem here? Charlie suggested. Artie bent over to his worksheet, and Charlie stared down at the notebook. Her mind kept returning to her father's house, and the shapes she'd drawn, and the shapes she'd drawn only made the impulse stronger. I have to go back. Are you okay? Artie leaned in cautiously. You ain't leaning in cautiously. You're leaning in to get it. You need to stop. Anyway, Charlie stared down at her notebook now that she noticed the rectangles. They seemed more prominent than the notes. She could focus on nothing else. I have to go back. Charlie shut the notebook and blinked hard. She ignored Artie's question, shoving the notebook into her backpack. I have to go. But I'm still stuck on the first problem. I'm sorry, I really am, she called over her shoulder as she hurried away. She bumped into two people as she passed the circulation desk, but was too flustered to mutter an apology. When she got to the door, she stopped, her guts twisting. There's something wrong. She hesitated, her hand suspended in the air, as if something was blocking her path. She took a hold of the knob, and instantly her hand felt fused to it, as if by electrical current. She couldn't turn it. She couldn't even let go. Suddenly, the knob moved on its own. Someone was turning it from the other side. Charlie yanked her hand away. I said yanked it, that's funny. Charlie yanked her hand away and stepped back as a boy with an enormous backpack brushed past her, snapping back into the moment. Charlie slipped back out before the door could swing shut again. Swear. Charlie sped toward Hurricane, trying to calm herself down as she drove. The windows were cracked open and the wind was rushing in. She thought back to Treadwell's lecture. Treadwell's lecture earlier in the week. At every moment, your senses are receiving far more information than they can process all at once. Maybe that was Artie's problem in class. They gazed at the mountains ahead, the open fields on either side, watching them go by. She began to feel some restraint had been loosened. She'd been spending too much time in her room or in class, not enough time out in the world. It was making her jumpy, exaggerating her natural awkwardness. She rolled her window down farther to letting in the air over the field to her right. A few birds were circling. No, Charlie stopped the car. Something is wrong. She got out, feeling ridiculous, but the last few days had put on a hair trigger. The birds were too large. She realized that they were turkey vultures, and some of them were already on the ground, cautiously approaching what looked like a prone figure. Could be anything. She leaned against the car, probably just a dead animal. Another moment, she turned back toward her car in frustration, but didn't get in. It's not a dead animal. She clenched her teeth and started to the spot the vultures were circling. As she got close to the birds on the ground, flapped their wings at the side of her and soared away. Charlie dropped to her knees. It was a woman. Charlie's eyes went first to her clothing. It was ripped up, just like the dead man Clay Burke had shown her. She leaned over to check the woman's neck, and she knew what she would find. They were deep, ugly gouges from the spring-lock suit of an animatronic. Another one! But before she could examine them closely, Charlie stopped, horrified. She looks just like me. Oh, it's David. It's David. I told y'all. She looks just like me. The woman's face was bruised and scratched, which obscured her features. Charlie shook her head. It was easier to imagine more of a resemblance than there really was, but her hair was brown, cut like Charlie's, and her face was the same round shape with the same complexion. Her features were different, but not that different. Charlie stood up and took a deliberate step back from the woman, suddenly aware of how exposed she was in the open field. Clay. I need to call Clay. She looked up at the sky, wishing for a way to keep the vultures at bay, to protect the body. I'm sorry, she whispered back at the dead woman. I'll be back. Charlie started off to her car, then broke into a run, faster and faster, across the field until she ran like something was right behind her. She got in and slammed the door, locking it as soon as she was inside. Panting heavily, Charlie thought for a second. She was about halfway between Hurricane and the school, but there was a gas station just down the road where she could call Clay. With a last glance at the spot where the body lay, Charlie pulled out onto the road. Oh my god, another body, yo. The gas station seemed empty as she arrived. Charlie realized that she had never actually seen anyone fueling up here. Is this a working gas station? The place was old and shabby, which she had noticed in passing, but she never stopped to look around. The pumps looked functional, though not new, and there were no shelter above them. They simply stood on concrete blocks in the middle of the gravel driveway, exposed to the weather. The building attached to the station might have been painted white once, but the paint had worn down to reveal gray boards underneath. It seemed to be tilting slightly, slipping on its foundation. There was a window, but it was filthy, almost the same color gray as the building's outside walls. Charlie hesitated, then went to the door and knocked. Sorry, I was looking at my recording. Sorry. A young woman answered, about Charlie's age, wearing a St. John's college t-shirt and jeans. Yeah, a young woman. Did I say woman? Jesus, speeding past words and I'm tired, okay? A young man appeared with a college t-shirt from St. John's and some, Yeah, he said, giving her a blank stare. Are you open? Yeah, he was chewing gum and wiped his hands on a grimy rag. Charlie took a deep breath. Come on, man. I really need to use your phone. The boy opened the door and let her in. There was more space inside than she thought. In addition to the counter, there was a convenience store, though most of the shelves were empty and the line of refrigerators at the back was dark. The young man was looking at Charlie expectantly. Can I use your phone? She asked again. Phones for customers only, he said. Okay. Charlie glanced back at her car. I'll get gas on the way out. Pump's broken. Maybe you want something out of the cooler, he said, nodding at the grimy freezer and sliding a glass off a faded patch of red paint. That must have been a logo. We got popsicles. Fine, I'll take a popsicle, Charlie said. Pick out anyone you want. Charlie leaned into the cooler. Pale, glassy eyes stared back at her. Beneath them was a furry red muzzle and its mouth open, poised to... Oh no! Charlie screamed and hurtled backward, banging into the shelf behind her. Several cans fell off the shelf and rolled across the floor. The sound echoed into an empty space. What is that? Charlie yelled, but the boy was cackling so hard he was gasping for breath. Peering back inside, Charlie realized that someone had placed a taxidermic animal into the cooler, maybe a coyote. That was great, he said. He finally managed to say. Charlie drew herself up, shaking with rage. I'd like to use your phone now, she said coldly. The boy beckoned her to the... That's petty! I thought this was David in disguise or something! Man! That was petty. I would like to use your phone now, she said coldly. The boy beckoned her to the counter, all smiles, and handed her a rotary phone. No long distance, though, he warned. Charlie turned her back and dialed, walking toward the cooler as the phone rang. She peered in the top, studying the stuffed canine from the high angle. Just like Foxy. Oh, God. This might be David. Clay Burke here. Clay, it's Charlie. Listen, I need you to meet me. It's another... She glanced at the young man behind the counter who was watching her intently, not trying to hide the fact that he was listening. It's like that thing you showed me before with the cows. What? Charlie, where are you? I'm at a gas station a few miles from you. Looks like a painted outhouse. Whoops. Oh, hey! Said the boy behind the counter, straightened for a moment, taking offense. Right, I know where you're at. I'll be right there. There was a... How do you instantly know where we're at? Did you kill them? That would make sense. Well, he's trying to... That would make sense. Anyway, right. I know where you're at. I'll be right there. Now my suspicion's on Clay Burke. Anyway, I know where you're at. There was a click from the other end. Thanks for the phone, Charlie said begrudgingly, and left without waiting for a reply. Charlie crouched again where the woman's body lay. She looked anxiously up at the road for Clay's car, but it didn't appear. At least the vultures hadn't returned. I could just stay in the car until he gets here, she thought. But Charlie didn't move from her spot. This woman had died horribly and been abandoned in a field. Now at least she didn't have a chance to be alone. Now at least she didn't have to be alone. That's kind of bogus. The more Charlie looked at her, the harder it was to dismiss the resemblance. Charlie shivered. Even the sun was warm on her back. She was feeling with a cold, crawling dread. Charlie spun around to see Clay Burke, and then sighed and shook her head. Sorry, I got here as fast as I could, he said lightly. She smiled. It's okay, I'm just on edge today. I think it's the third time I've jumped in the air when someone said my name. Clay wasn't listening. His eyes were fixed on the body. He knelt carefully beside it, scrutinizing it. Charlie could almost see him filling every detail away. She held her breath, not wanting to disturb him. Did you touch the body? He asked sharply, not looking away from the corpse. Yes, she admitted. I checked to see if it was the same injuries as the man. Did she? Yeah. I think I know how she was killed. I think I know she was killed the same way. Oh no, things are getting real. Clay nodded. Charlie watched as she got up and circled the woman, dropping down, looking more closely at her head, and again at her feet. Finally, he turned his attention to Charlie again. How did you find her? He asked. I saw the vultures circling above the field. I went to check. Why did you go and check? His eyes were hard, because now he's thinking that Charlie killed her? His eyes were hard, and Charlie felt a trickle of fear. Fear. Surely Clay didn't suspect her. Why wouldn't he? She thought. Who else would know how to use spring locks? I bet he would come up with a million theories about me. Twisted girl avenges father's death. X out psychodrama. Films at 11. She took a deep breath, meeting Clay's eyes. I checked because of the body you showed me. It was in a field. I thought it might be another one. She kept her voice as steady as she could. Clay nodded. A steely expression slipping from his face, replaced with worry. Charlie, this girl looks like you, he said bluntly. Not much like me. She could be your twin. No, Charlie said more harshly than she intended. She looks nothing like my twin. Clay gave her a puzzled look, then comprehension dawned. I'm sorry, you had a twin, didn't you? Your brother? I barely remember him, she said softly, then swallowed. All I do is remember him. I know she looks like me, she added weakly. We're right near a college town. She's a young white female with brown hair. You're not a rare type, Charlie. No offense. Do you think it's a coincidence? Clay didn't look at her. There was another body found this morning, he said. Another girl? Oh no, yes, as a matter of fact, been dead for a couple of days. Probably killed 2 nights ago. Charlie looked down at him in alarm. Does this mean this is going to keep happening? Unless you think we can stop it. Charlie nodded. I can help, she said. She looked again at the woman's face. She looks nothing like me. Why do you keep saying that? It doesn't even matter. Let me go to her house, she added abruptly, seized by a sudden impulse to prove it, to gather evidence that she and the victim were not the same. What? Her house? Clay said, giving her a dash's look. God, sorry. You asked me to help. Let me help. Clay didn't answer. Instead, he reached into the woman's pockets one by one, searching for her wallet. That's messed up. He had to move the body to do it, and she jerked a little as he did, like a ghastly puppet. Charlie waited, and I feel like that was... Anyway, at last, he came back with her wallet, and he handed Charlie her driver's license. Tracy Horton. She doesn't look like a Tracy. That's messed up! You got the address? Clay scanned the road for police cars. Charlie read it quickly and handed the license back. I'm going to give you 20 minutes before I radio this in. Use it. Tracy Horton lived in a small house off a back road. Her nearest neighbor's house were visible. Charlie couldn't imagine they would hear her scream, if she'd managed to scream at all. There was a blue car in the driveway, just like Charlie's car, right? Isn't Charlie's car blue? I remember it, right? Them saying it. But if Tracy had been taken from her home, since presumably she hadn't been just wandering through the field, it could have easily been hers. Charlie pulled in behind the car and went to the front door. She knocked, wondering what she was gonna do if someone answered. God, I really need to stop reading at this time. Jesus, I really should have thought this through. She couldn't be the one to inform a parent, spouse, or sibling of a young woman's death. Why did I assume she lived alone? No one answered. Charlie tried again. When there was no response, she tried the door. It was unlocked. Oh, God. And Charlie walked quietly through the house, not really sure what she was looking for. She glanced at her watch. 10 to 20 minutes had just passed just driving here. And she had to assume that the police would get here faster than she did. Why did I follow the speed limit the whole way here? The living room and the kitchen were clean, but they conveyed no information to her. Charlie didn't know what peach-painted walls said about a person, or the fact that there were 3 dining room chairs instead of 4. There were 2 bathrooms. One had the steerly air of a guest room that was slowly being taken over by a storage. The bed was made and clean towels were folded on the chest of drawers, but cardboard boxes filled a quarter of the room. The other bedroom looked lived in. The walls were green, the bedspread pale blue, and the piles of clothing on the floor. Charlie stood in the doorway for a moment, and she found she could not go inside. I don't even know what I'm looking for. This woman's life could be sifted through to the last grain of... This woman's life would be sifted through to the last grain by trained investigators. Her diary would be read, if she had one. Her secrets would be revealed, if she had any. Charlie didn't need to be a part of it. She turned and walked quickly but quietly back to the front of the house, almost running down the front steps. Standing by the car, she checked her watch again. 6 minutes before Clay called in the body. Charlie went to the little blue car and peered inside. Like the blue house, it was neat. There was dry cleaning hanging from the back window and a half-empty soda in the cup holder. She walked all around it looking for something. Mud in the tires, scratches in the paint, but there was something unusual. 5 minutes. Oh, there was nothing unusual. 5 minutes. She walked briskly through the unkempt grass, the boarded sides of the house. When she reached the backyard, she stopped dead. Before her were 3 huge holes in the ground. Longer than they were wide, they looked like graves. But at the second glance, they were too messy. Their outlines poorly defined. Charlie walked around them in a circle. They were lined up next to one another. They were shallow. Don't tell me the whole house was... Did David kill the whole family? There was another girl, and there was a man, and now there's a woman. Ugh. That's gotta suck, if he killed the whole family in that house. Anyway, Charlie walked around them in a circle. They were lined up next to one another, and they were shallow, but the dirt at the bottom was loose. Charlie grabbed a stick off the ground and poked it in the middle of the hole. It went in almost a foot before it was stopped by denser soil. The dirt dug out of them was strewn messily around. Whoever dug the holes had carelessly tossed it everywhere, not bothering to pile it up. 2 minutes. Charlie hesitated for another moment, then lowered herself into the middle hole. Her feet sunk into the loose dirt, and she fought to steady herself, catching her balance. It wasn't too deep. The walls came up to her waist. She knelt and put her palm against the wall of the grave. The hole, she reminded herself. The dirt was loose here. The dirt was loose here, too, and the wall was rough. Something had been hidden there, under the ground. The air was growing thin. I'm running out of oxygen. I will die like this alone in the dark. Charlie's throat seized. She felt as if she couldn't breathe. She climbed out of the hole and back up into the grass, Tracy Horton's backyard. Charlie took a deep breath, focusing all of her attention on pushing away the panic. When she was free of it, she checked her watch. -1 minute. He's already called them, but something kept her there. Something familiar. The loose dirt. Charlie's mind raced. Something climbed out of these. I know exactly what climbed out of these. The animatronics climbed out of them. That's why the Twisted teasers had, like, dirt all around the... Oh, lordy, lordy, lord. And that's why Scott showed us that. So we can understand what climbed out of it. Something climbed out of these 3 holes, right? I don't remember the number of the holes, but oh no, the animatronics came out of those holes. From a distance, a siren was wailing. It would be here in no time. Charlie hurried away to her car and pulled out of the driveway, taking the first corner without caring where it would take her. The holes stayed in her mind, the image like a stain. Something forming through the static? Anyway, let's get a little bit through chapter 6. Charlie slowed her car with half the cops in the hurricane converging on the area. Now was not the time to be stopped for speeding. She was grubby with dirt from the dead woman's backyard and had a nagging feeling that there was something she was forgetting. I have another idea where the animatronics came from. They probably came from Sister Location, because you guys remember Sister Location is underground, so maybe David has like a whole underground... Okay, let me stop. Anyway, or somebody else other than David, but let me... Back to this. Afton. Okay, I'm sorry. Sorry, guys. Like, well, I gotta think, though, because, like, what if William Afton's doing this? Isn't he in this storyline? Wasn't he originally introduced in this storyline before Sister Location? So maybe William Afton is doing all of this from underground, down in Sister Location. That would explain why Scott posted like a little baby teaser there on the FNAF World site. Maybe that was Twisted Baby and we don't even know. Alright, let me stop. Charlie slowed the car with half the cops... Yeah, sorry. She had a nagging feeling that there was something she was forgetting about. John, she realized. She was supposed to meet him. She checked the clock on the dashboard almost 2 hours ago. Her heart sank. He'll think I stood him up. No, he'll think I'm dead, she amended. Given the perilous history of their relationship, he'd probably think the second was more likely. When she got to the restaurant where they had planned to meet, a small Italian place across town, Charlie ran in from the parking lot at full speed. She skidded to a stop of the teenager's hostess, who greeted her with a flustered look. "Can I help you?" she asked Charlie, taking a step back. Charlie caught a glimpse of herself in the mirror behind the hostess counter. There were streaks of dirt on her face and clothes she hadn't thought to clean up first. She quickly wiped her cheeks and with her hands before answering the girl. Supposed to be meeting someone, a tall guy, brown hair. It's kind of... She gestured vaguely at the top of her head, at attempting to indicate the habitual chaos of John's hair, but the hostess looked at her blankly. Charlie bit her lip in frustration. He must have left. Of course he left. You're 2 hours late. Charlie? A voice rang out. John? You're still here? She cried out too loud for the quiet restaurant as he appeared behind the hostess, looking profoundly relieved. I figured I might as well eat while I'm here. He swallowed what was in his mouth and laughed. Are you okay? I thought you might not be coming. I'm fine. Where are you sitting? Are you still sitting? Well, I mean, you're obviously not sitting. You're standing. But, I mean, before you were standing, where are you sitting? God, you sound so guilty, man. You're filled with dirt. Your body's like filled with dirt, man. John's about to get the wrong idea up in here. Charlie ran her fingers into her hair and clenched her fist at her scalp, trying to resemble the thought. She mumbled an apology to the room. Not sure who it was for. John glanced around nervously and gestured toward a table near the kitchen. There was a mostly empty plate with a half-eaten breadstick resting on it and a cup of coffee, and the second place setting untouched. They sat down, and he looked at her appraisingly. Then John leaned across the table and asked in a low voice, "Charlie, what happened?" "You wouldn't believe me if I told you," she said lightly. His face remained concerned. "You're filthy. Did you fall down in the parking lot?" "Yes, I fell down in the parking lot and rolled down a hill into a dumpster, then fell out of the dumpster and tripped on the way in." "Happy? Stop looking at me like that." "Like what?" "Like you have the right to disapprove of me." John pulled back in his chair and his eyes wide. He blinked hard, and Charlie sighed. "John, I'm sorry. I'll tell you everything. I just need some time to collect my thoughts." She laughed, exhausted, shaken sound, and buried her face in her hands. John leaned back, signaled for the waitress to bring the check. Breathing heavily, Charlie looked around the restaurant. It was almost empty. The hostess and the only other waitress were talking together near the door, with no apparent interest in what their customers were doing. There was a family of 4 by the window, the children just barely out of toddlerhood. One kept sliding out of his chair and onto the floor every time his mother turned her attention away. The other, a girl, was happily drawing on a tablecloth with markers. No one seemed to care what was going on, but the emptiness made Charlie feel exposed. "I'm gonna go clean up," she said. "Bathroom?" John pointed out. Charlie got up and left the table just as the waitress arrived to deliver his ticket. There was a payphone in the hallway. I bet you John's gonna think like Charlie's been using her. Charlie's been using him. Because like every single time Charlie wants to go to the bathroom or something, man is either left with a check or he's left to just walk home alone or something. Charlie got up and left the table just as the waitress arrived to deliver his ticket. There was a payphone in the hallway, and Charlie stopped at it. Wavering, she craned her neck to see if John was watching, but from where she stood, she could see only a tiny corner of their table. Quietly, she called Clayburgh's office. To her surprise, he answered. "You saw her backyard," he said. It wasn't a question. "Can you give me the other address?" Charlie asked. "There could be a pattern or something." There sure could," he said dryly. "That's why I raced back to the station instead of sticking around to measure the holes." "You have a pen?" "Hang on." The hostess was briefly absent from her station, and Charlie dropped the phone, letting it swing on a metal cord as she hurried to the podium and snatched the pen and took out the takeout menu. She rushed back. "Clay, go ahead." He recited the names and addresses, and she scribbled them dutifully in the margins of the menu. "Thanks," she said. When he was done and hung up, without waiting for him to respond, she folded the menu and slipped it into her back pocket. In the bathroom, Charlie washed off as much of the dirt as she could. She couldn't clean her clothing, but at least her face was scrubbed, and her hair was rearranged a little more neatly. As she moved to the exit of the bathroom, getting tired, an image flashed unbidden through her thoughts. It was the face of the dead woman. She could be her twin, she heard Clay say, in his low, authoritative voice. Charlie shook her head. "It's a coincidence. He's right. How many brown-haired, college-aged women are there around here?" The first victim was a man. It doesn't mean anything. She grabbed the doorknob to leave, but froze. It was just like in the library. Charlie released the knob and spun it slowly back into the position, releasing a horrible creak as it moved. The costumes had been disturbed, and the creaking noise was so faint and careful she scarcely even heard it. Charlie looked up from her game, and there was a figure in the door. Charlie glanced wildly around the room, pulling herself back to the present. With a swell of panic, Charlie pulled on the bathroom door, but somehow it was sealed shut. She mouthed the words, but no sound came out. "I know you're there. I'm trying to get you." I have to get inside," she screamed. The door burst open, and Charlie fell into John's arms. It's like John just knows, man. "Charlie," she collapsed to her knees. Charlie looked up to see the scattered handful of customers all staring at her. John glanced into the bathroom behind her, then quickly turned his attention back to Charlie, helping her to her feet. "I'm okay. I'm fine." She shook loose She shook loose of his hands. I'm fine. The door was stuck. I felt hot. Charlie fanned at her face, trying to make a sensible story out of it. Come on, let's get to the car. He tried to take her arm, but she shook free. I'm fine. She dug her keys into her pocket and walked straight to the door, not waiting for him. An old woman was openly staring at Charlie, her fork suspended in the air. Charlie returned her stare. Food poisoning, Charlie said plainly. The woman's face went pale. Why did you say that? Food poisoning. Charlie walked out of the door. When they got out to the car, John sat down in the passenger seat and looked at Charlie expectantly. You sure you're okay? It's been a rough day, that's all. I'm sorry. Tell me what happened. Tell him what happened, Charlie thought. I went to go to my dad's, my old house, she said instead, surprising herself. Be honest, her inner voice said harshly. You know what kind of creature is doing this, and you know who built it. Stay focused. Right, he said, his voice softening. You haven't seen it before the storm. She nodded. He thinks I want to see the damage. She'd forgotten about the storm until now, but sudden kindness in John's voice made her nervous. Is there anything left? She imagined the house razed to the ground and felt a sudden wrongness, like a part of her had been ripped away. She never thought of the house as anything but a house. But now, as she drove toward what was left of it, she felt a painful knot in her stomach. It was where all the clearest memories of her father was kept, his rough hands building her toys, showing her his new creations in her workshop, and holding her close when she was afraid. They lived there together, and just the two of them. It felt the place where he had finally died. And it was the place where he had finally died. Charlie felt as if the joy, the sorrow, the love, and the anguish of their 2 lifetimes had poured off into the very bones of the house, of the old house. The idea of it being wrecked by a storm was utter violation. She shook her head and gripped the wheel tighter, suddenly aware of how angry she was. Her love of the house, even of her father, could never be simple. They had both betrayed her, but now there was a new monster out there. She clenched her jaw, trying to fight off the tears. Dad, what did you do? Oh God, maybe where's the wolf play into this though? I'm still confused about that wolf. But now we know that Twisted Freddy and Bonnie and them, they're out there now. They're out there. They're doing this. It's clear that the other animatronics are doing this. But who's orchestrating all of this? That's the real question. As soon as they were out of the town center, Charlie sped up. Clay would be tied up dealing with the newest victim for a while, but eventually he would think to come to her father's house as well. She could only hope that she connected the dots first. You're on the same side. Charlie put a hand to her head. It rubbed her temple. The impulse to guard her father's reputation from what was coming was visceral, but it was also nonsensical. Less than a mile away from the house, they passed a construction site. It was set back too far from the road for Charlie to see what it was, though it looked abandoned at the moment. I did a little work over there when I first got here, John said. Oh crap, some huge demolition project. You have some weird stuff out here. You wouldn't know by looking at it. He studied the countryside for a moment. Alright guys, that's a little bit of chapter 6. If you guys want more of the Twisted Ones, make sure you guys hit the like button, comment below, subscribe for more comic history today. I will see you guys in the next chapter of the Twisted Ones, which might be streamed. I don't know. I might just stream this and then just discuss it and stuff. So yeah. Anyway guys, peace out.